rise up, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, kings and queens, friends, frenemies, and your agents. My name is Brother Marley, and this is the Senegambia One channel. I'd like to welcome you today. We are talking about a conversation I had with ChatGPT. Now, as in a previous video that I did, link up here somewhere, I spoke about how has been deplatformed by the US State Department. Now, we hear regularly about freedom of speech and how important it is and how it's a First Amendment and so on and so forth in the USA. And yet we're finding that there are attacks happening on free speech, left, right, and center. So I asked ChatGPT about it, whether it knew about this deplatforming and what it meant, why this was happening. Because, you know, I have my own ideas as to why it's happening, but I'm also aware I have a bias. And so have a look. This is a conversation that I had with ChatGPT.
Is a media platform dedicated to telling African stories from a uniquely African perspective. It provides news, analysis, and cultural content that challenges mainstream narratives about the continent. Often focuses on topics like politics, culture, history, and socioeconomic issues relevant to Africa, aiming to highlight the voices and perspectives of Africans. It utilizes social media and other digital channels to reach a global audience.
So it knows who we're talking about. My question is, do you know why it's been deplatformed?
Stream, a Nairobi-based online media outlet, was recently deplatformed from major social media platforms like YouTube, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Google Workspace. The bans came after the U.S. State Department alleged that Stream was part of a covert Russian influence operation linked to the state-owned Russian media outlet RT. This led to accusations that was disseminating Russian disinformation, though Stream denies these claims and maintains that it operates independently with a focus on providing African-centered content from an anti-imperialist perspective. Google's ban also resulted in Stream losing 2 years' worth of emails and files, which the platform described as an act of censorship driven by U.S. political pressure. The outlet has criticized the actions as an attempt to silence its voice and has continued to deny any affiliation with Russian propaganda operations, claiming it aims to amplify African voices globally and provide cutting-edge content challenging negative stereotypes about Africa.
So some big allegations there. So I asked, do you have any evidence of the Russian links to?
There is no publicly available concrete evidence directly linking to Russian influence beyond the allegations made by U.S. officials. The accusations from the U.S. Secretary of State suggested that Stream was spreading Russian propaganda, implying ties to RT, the state-owned Russian media network. However, Stream has denied these claims, stating that they have not violated any policies and emphasizing their mission to provide African-centered content. These allegations appear to be based on suspicions regarding content that may align with narratives favored by Russian media, but no specific evidence has been shared publicly to confirm such links. The deplatforming actions were reportedly in response to these allegations, which Stream has described as unjust and part of a broader effort to silence its voice.
All right, so maybe my bias is becoming true. I know where this is going. So now I have another question. So anyone making content antithetical to US interests can be deplatformed without evidence by the US State Department?
The case of illustrates a broader issue related to the power of major tech companies, often influenced by government pressures, to control online content and information. When platforms like Stream are deplatformed without concrete evidence presented publicly, it raises questions about freedom of expression and whether political motivations are behind such decisions. In this specific case, U.S. officials allege that was disseminating Russian propaganda, which led to multiple platforms banning them. The tech companies involved did not provide detailed explanations or evidence of policy violations, which Stream argues is an act of censorship. This situation highlights concerns that media organizations producing content critical of or antithetical to U.S. interests could be disproportionately targeted, especially if there are geopolitical tensions involved. Historically, social media platforms and tech giants have acted in response to government concerns, as seen with previous bans related to Russian, Chinese, or other government-linked accounts during periods of political tension. This creates a contentious area where national security concerns can potentially conflict with principles of free speech. The broader implication is that when tech companies take such actions without transparency or a clear legal basis, it can set a precedent for suppressing dissenting voices. Critics of these actions often argue that they represent a dangerous overreach and undermine the democratic value of free speech. It underscores the power dynamics between governments, large corporations, and independent media, especially in the current geopolitical climate.
Yeah, so we're hearing misinformation, disinformation, pop the balloon, kiss information.
I'm 19.
It's all nonsense. There's been this change of definition about different words. Like back in the day, the word woke was as far as, say, Erykah Badu using it, or even Childish Gambino singing it in his song. It was a verb. It was something that you do, something for black people to stay on their P's and Q's and remember, who they are and what situation that we're in. Whereas now it's some blue-haired, gender fluid, wannabe man, cat dad. So don't have your head turned by these new words with their new definitions given to us by the mainstream media. Back in the day, misinformation meant misleading information. Now, misinformation means anything that does not go along with the narrative that is pushed by the White House. But I digress. So I asked a quick question. Was the Black Panthers seen as a Russian agent back in the day?
Yes, the Black Panther Party, BPP, was often portrayed by U.S. authorities as being influenced by foreign agents, including the Soviet Union. During the 1960s and 1970s, the U.S. government, through the FBI's COINTELPRO program, sought to discredit and undermine the Black Panther Party by portraying it as a dangerous extremist group with alleged ties to communist forces. The Cold War context amplified these accusations. At that time, the United States was heavily invested in containing communism, and any radical or revolutionary group could be perceived as susceptible to Soviet influence. The Black Panther Party's socialist ideology and relationships with international anti-imperialist movements, including visits to countries like Cuba and Algeria, were used to argue that they were part of a broader communist conspiracy against the United States. However, the BPP's primary goals were centered on issues of racial equality, police brutality, and community empowerment within the U.S. They did indeed establish international connections, but these were mostly aligned with their anti-imperialist stance rather than direct control by foreign powers. The portrayal of the Panthers as Soviet agents was largely part of a broader strategy by U.S. authorities to delegitimize them and curb their influence domestically. This was a key aspect of the FBI's COINTELPRO operation, which aimed to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize what the FBI considered subversive activities.
If the Black Panthers were portrayed as influenced by the USSR, while they were actually centered around racial equality, is it not likely that is not a Russian agent, but in reality centered around Pan-Africanism? Simple question.
Yes, it is very possible, like the Black Panther Party, is primarily focused on issues relevant to its community, in this case, Pan-Africanism and African narratives, without being an agent of a foreign government. The portrayal of as linked to Russia could be part of an effort to discredit a platform that challenges dominant narratives, much like how the Black Panther Party was discredited during the Cold War era. The BPP was focused on fighting systemic racism and advocating for Black empowerment, but it was framed by U.S. authorities as a Soviet-backed threat due to its anti-imperialist stance and leftist ideologies. This framing served a broader political purpose during the Cold War, when any group that criticized U.S. policies or aligned with socialist principles was treated with suspicion. Similarly, provides content from an African perspective that may challenge mainstream narratives, particularly those propagated by Western media. The U.S. government's allegations of Russian influence could reflect the geopolitical context, where narratives that contradict U.S. interests are sometimes labeled as foreign propaganda to delegitimize them. Without publicly available evidence, the accusations against could be more about limiting the influence of dissenting voices than about any actual ties to Russia. This is especially plausible considering emphasis on African-centered content, anti-colonial perspectives, and support for issues that challenge Western hegemony in media narratives.
So the good brothers like Hugh P. Newton and Stokely Carmichael gave their best years despite not having a lick of free speech. Fred Hampton gave his life because of free speech, and the US State Department is like, oh, whoopsie, we didn't mean to, or, it was something that we had to do just because we thought that it could be susceptible to Russian influence. You see, they'll wait until everybody's dead and then say something about it. So we have to be very aware of this kind of behavior going on, and these type of words that are coming out from the State Department about this YouTube channel. So I asked, is the USA currently in a Cold War with any group that criticizes the USA?
The current geopolitical climate is often compared to a new Cold War, particularly due to tensions between the United States and major powers like China and Russia. However, the concept of a Cold War is also relevant when examining how the U.S. government and its allies interact with organizations, groups, or media outlets that criticize U.S. policies. In some ways, the U.S. has taken actions reminiscent of a Cold War approach, particularly when dealing with dissenting voices that challenge American influence. For example, 1. Media deplatforming and influence campaigns. Media organizations like that promote narratives challenging U.S. perspectives have faced deplatforming. This echoes Cold War tactics where dissenting voices were silenced or discredited, sometimes labeled as influenced by foreign powers, without clear evidence. The accusation of being linked to foreign influence remains a powerful tool to delegitimize voices seen as countering U.S. interests. 2. Surveillance and labeling of activist groups. Activist groups advocating for systemic change, whether related to racial equality or economic reform, have sometimes been monitored or labeled as threats. In the past, the FBI's COINTELPRO program targeted civil rights groups and labeled them as subversive due to their criticism of U.S. policies. This pattern can still be observed in the way the U.S. treats various social movements, especially those with socialist or anti-imperialist messages. 3. Geopolitical rivalries. The U.S. government's approach to countries or groups perceived as aligned with adversaries like Russia or China often involves economic sanctions, diplomatic pressure, or attempts to limit their influence globally. This also affects non-state actors, including media platforms and advocacy groups that do not align with U.S. interests or question American foreign policy. In a broader sense, it can be said that the U.S. is, to some extent, adopting Cold War-like tactics to deal with entities that criticize or oppose its global influence. This includes using political, economic, and technological tools to suppress or counteract dissenting narratives. However, it's important to recognize that not all criticism is treated equally, and there are various factors, such as the entity's power, influence, and alignment with adversaries that determine the U.S. response.
No one cares about what we over here in Africa are really saying. Like, it doesn't impact anybody's life. No one's really bothered by it. So this is the reason why they can't just say, we don't like talking all this good stuff about Africa, and we don't like pointing out how we are such bullies around the world. So what they have to do is find something that everyone's scared of. Russia. They're doing Russian disinformation. They're part of the Russian disinformation campaign. It worked with the Black Panthers, so we're going to try it again here. It's worked time and time again. It's an old trope, but it's a trope that keeps on giving. And so they're going to try it again. Meanwhile, those of us who are speaking this conversation of freedom, no matter where you are, and it's not just Black people, no matter where you are. We're going to have to continue having that conversation. We're going to have to continue to work. We're going to have to continue having those conversations without being specific, without being, obtuse about how we feel and about what we like. It's going to have to all be, a lot of smoke and mirrors in our videos and talking code going forward. Now, you may feel like as though, well, this is something that's happening to you lot outside of the United States, and it doesn't concern me because I'm in the United States, I'm a US citizen, and hence my First Amendment rights are protected. Well, just for you, have a look at this.
If, in fact, we could build these institutions, and we have built them, and by the way, one institution we've built, we've got a grant from the United States government because nobody else could do it in terms of some of the projects we put on the ground among working class black people, ordinary black people, working class people who live in what they call ghettos and stuff like that. Not the people who you saw at the Democratic Party convention, rich people, multimillionaires and stuff like that complaining about poverty, etc., but the people ourselves. That's the thing. They don't want to see the impoverished working class of this country, black people, working independent of that kind of control. So yeah, that's a problem, because if we could do it, the question is, why doesn't the government do it? If it really believes in what it says it is around the world.
I am really surprised. I mean, I was surprised to see when they raided you. I'm even more surprised to see that they are taking you to court. So this must really be a threat to the establishment, and this should matter to everybody, because if they can do this to you, they can do this to anybody. And so anybody who stands up and does mutual aid in their community, anybody who says we can be self-sufficient, anybody who speaks out and threatens the narrative of the establishment, they can come down and bring the hammer down and then just make up stuff saying you're Russian. I mean, that's what they did to Donald Trump and anybody who they don't like. They did it to Tulsi Gabbard, who still serves in the military. They said she was a Russian agent. So that's the game of the establishment, is that anybody who's a threat to them, they immediately call them a Russian. And I really am surprised that they're do they have any I mean, do your lawyers have any fear that you'll be convicted? Are you afraid that you'll be convicted?
Well, I think it's it's a possibility I'll be convicted. The fact is, look, I'm 83 years old. I'll be 83 in October. And for a 15-year prison sentence is a life sentence for me. That's the assumption. And I think that they intend to put me in prison for life. There's no doubt in my mind about that. They wouldn't have gone through all of this if they did not intend to do it. But our lawyers, we've got an extraordinary array of lawyers. I mean, a battery of lawyers who've taken this on. And if it is something that is based on law and the Constitution, we'll win. But the fact is, I think the system makes the, I think, incorrect assumption that if you say Russia, 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 black, 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 and black and Russia, that they have created enough prejudices among the people that people will overlook the fact that the government has no evidence that they can use.
15 years of jail time for an 84-year-old man for sharing his opinions. Wow, look, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the future holds for us. But I believe that we will succeed. We will rise up, as I say in every video that I put out on this YouTube. And I believe that this hegemony, this tyranny that we live under, no matter where you are in the world, will be over very soon. This is your brother Marty, and until next time, you take care of yourself. Peace.